Rage radiated through Langston Price's body, a quiet, blistering fury that never touched his face. He stood motionless under the icy LED glow of Lakeview International Airport's first-class lounge entryway. The hum of suitcase wheels and distant boarding calls blurring into static around him. In front of him, a white-gloved attendant gestured mechanically toward the hallway. "Sir, if you wouldn't mind waiting outside while we sort this out." Her rehearsed smile never reached her eyes. Just moments earlier, a white businessman, same ticket class, same loyalty tier, had breezed past her with a nod and a grin. But Langston, she hadn't even scanned his boarding pass before deciding he didn't belong. The collar of his coat itched against his neck, damp from Chicago's sleet, his hand clenched around the strap of a plain duffel bag. He said nothing, just nodded, adjusted his glasses, the ones he didn't need, and stepped aside. No one recognized him. Not the staff, not the passengers bustling past. And that was exactly the point. 27 years building Avianair from scratch, and now, under disguise, he'd become invisible in the company that bore his DNA. But this wasn't about vanity. It was about truth. And the moment that attendant dismissed him like an afterthought, Langston's mission snapped into terrifying clarity. The rot he suspected wasn't theoretical. It was personal. 3 weeks earlier, high above Chicago's restless skyline, Langston Price stood in the glass-wrapped stillness of his 51st floor corner office, watching storm clouds choke the late afternoon light. Thunder rolled somewhere over Lake Michigan, echoing faintly against the steel and glass of the city. The windows trembled, but Langston didn't flinch. His jaw was set, the lines on his face carved deeper than usual, his custom suit crisp, yet hanging on him like armor worn too long. On the desk behind him, untouched coffee had gone cold beside a glowing tablet screen, flashing red. Customer satisfaction down 11%. He didn't need numbers to know something was broken. He could feel it. In the silence of too many complaint reports, in the sanitized optimism of his VP's memos, in the way people hesitated to say the quiet part out loud. The door hissed open. Vivian Rowe entered without knocking, her presence as familiar and grounding as the leather chair she always claimed during high-stakes meetings. 62, with silver hair in a precise bob and a walk that dared anyone to underestimate her, she set a folder down and didn't sit. "Langston, it's not the delays, it's not the food, it's who's getting treated like they don't belong." Her voice was low, weighted. She slid the folder forward. "You need to see this." Inside, flagged transcripts, recorded complaints, loyalty members citing bias. "Something changed," she said. "And it's not just sloppy service, it's selective service." Langston flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing. "These aren't metrics," he said quietly. "They're warning shots." The storm outside cracked the sky in two. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Langston turned, walking past the framed photographs of early Avianair. Him shaking hands with ground crews, his first hangar ribbon cutting, smiling flight attendants from day one. "You remember 2005? He asked. "You threw your back out pretending to load baggage, and we caught that maintenance scam on the LA route." Vivian let out a breath. "Don't tell me—" "2 weeks," Langston said. "No titles, no handlers, just me and a boarding pass." Vivian stared at him. "You're the CEO of a Fortune 500 airline, not a stuntman." "Exactly," he replied, slipping off his watch and setting it on the table like a signal. "No one expects it. I need to see what they see, feel what they feel." He paced back to the window, lightning washing his reflection in electric blue. "I built this company to be different. If it's become like the rest, I need to know. And if it's worse, I need to fix it." Vivian shook her head, but her eyes softened. "You disappear for 2 weeks, you'll start a board panic." "Not if I'm off-grid at that leadership retreat in Banff," he said. "You run this place half the time anyway." Silence lingered before she gave the slightest nod. "You check in every day, and the moment things go south, I'll pull the plug," he promised. But deep down, they both knew he wouldn't. The first few flights passed like static, noisy but harmless. From Houston to Salt Lake to Phoenix, Langston Price, disguised as Elliot Green, moved unnoticed through crowded terminals and cramped coach seats. His salt and pepper beard, Off-the-rack jackets and worn sneakers transformed him from CEO to forgettable traveler. He scribbled observations in a leather-bound notebook, noting long wait times, distracted staff, and a few scuffed tray tables. But nothing sinister. If anything, he started to wonder if he'd overreacted. Maybe the drop in satisfaction was just pandemic fatigue. Maybe Vivian was chasing shadows. But on day 4, aboard flight AV3201 from Denver to Miami, that illusion shattered. It started small, a black veteran in a faded US Army cap struggling to stow his carry-on. A flight attendant breezed past him, eyes fixed on the galley. Seconds later, the same attendant stopped 2 rows up to help a white businessman with the identical problem. Langston's jaw tightened. He made a note. The woman's name tag read D. Willis. Mid-flight, he saw her again, this time curtly dismissing a Latina mother asking for warm milk for her toddler. "We're not a daycare," Willis snapped before vanishing down the aisle. Langston leaned back in his seat, pulse quickening. Patterns were forming, subtle, deniable, yet deliberate. By the time the plane touched down in Miami, his notebook held 4 entries marked, possibly racial bias. Still, he told himself, maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he was projecting. The real test came 2 days later, back in Atlanta. Flight delayed, terminal packed. Langston decided to enter the first-class lounge using his legitimate diamond tier status. The receptionist, young, white, with a fixed glassy-eyed smile, scanned his pass, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. Could you wait outside while we verify your credentials?" Her voice was syrupy but firm. "It's a new security protocol." Langston blinked. "Of course," he replied, stepping aside, but even as he did, a white passenger with the same diamond card walked past him and was waved through without a second glance. Langston's stomach dropped. His hand clenched the strap of his duffel bag so tightly his knuckles whitened. A light rain streaked the windows. Somewhere behind him, a CNN anchor muttered about market futures. He stared at the receptionist's name tag, Rachel Sloan. Minutes passed. No one came to get him, no system alert pinged. Nothing was being verified, they just didn't want him in there, and no one was even pretending otherwise. His heart pounded not from shock, but recognition. He'd seen this before, felt it in boardrooms, airports, restaurants. But never like this, not in a space he had built. The realization hovered at the edge of clarity, but hadn't yet solidified. As he turned away, Langston forced a calm breath and reached for his notebook. The page shook under his pen. Line after line, he recorded the moment in crisp, furious detail. Something was wrong. And now he knew. This wasn't just a fluke. It was the beginning. Langston sat in the main terminal, notebook open across his knee, the steady thrum of Atlanta's airport pulsing around him like a heartbeat too fast to calm. His pen moved mechanically, but his mind was adrift, hooked on the sickening unease that the incident at the lounge wasn't just an isolated error. He flipped back through pages, delays in courtesy, patterns in service, the tonal shifts in attendants' voices depending on who they addressed. His brows furrowed. Too many moments had felt off. But maybe, he thought, he was reading into things. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Then came the voice. "They did the same to me last month." Langston looked up. A man in his early 60s stood before him, brown skin, close-cropped grey hair, tired but steady eyes. He dropped into the seat beside Langston with a sigh that seemed to carry years of repetition. Same lounge, same treatment, same excuse. He extended a hand. "Caleb Monroe, Diamond member 15 years. Not that it seems to mean much anymore." Langston accepted the handshake. "Elliot Green. Platinum." He hesitated, then added, "You fly this route often?" 3 weeks out of 4, pharmaceuticals. Caleb leaned back, glancing toward the lounge doors with a hollow chuckle. "Used to be proud to fly Avianair. Lately, I board with a chip on my shoulder and a plan B in my inbox." Langston's stomach churned. What changed? Caleb paused, rubbing his temple. "About a year ago, things got slippery. Longer waits, more random security checks for folks like me. Upgrades that disappear at the gate, always little things. But they pile up. Langston nodded slowly. The man's words mirrored his notes, but hearing them spoken out loud hit different. Like someone else had read his own inner monologue. "Did you file complaints?" Caleb laughed, but there was no humor in it. "More than a few. Got automated emails back. Thank you for your feedback." Nothing changed. He stood as the boarding call rang out over the PA system. "Good luck getting in there," he said with a nod toward the lounge. "Just don't hold your breath." As Caleb walked away, Langston remained seated, hands motionless over the notebook. The terminal noise dimmed in his ears. He no longer felt like a passenger. He felt like a witness, a reluctant participant in a machine he had designed, now warped by unseen hands. His phone buzzed. "Vivian, check-in time. How's it going?" He stared at the message, then slowly turned the screen face down. Something wasn't just wrong, it was systemic, coordinated, controlled. But by who? And how deep? He glanced at the lounge again. Rachel Sloane had returned to her post, chatting easily with another traveler. Smiling, perfectly composed. Langston stood. This time his walk toward the desk was slower, more deliberate. An executive hiding behind a shadow. He didn't know it yet, but what he was about to uncover would turn his suspicion into certainty, and his company into a battlefield. Langston stepped toward the lounge desk with quiet purpose, every footfall echoing beneath the high ceilings of Concourse B like the ticking of a countdown. Rachel Sloane looked up. For a second, just a flicker, recognition danced in her eyes before the mask of professionalism snapped back into place. "Mr. Green," she chirped, tone now suspiciously sweet, "I was just about to come find you. We've sorted out the issue with your boarding pass." Her smile tightened as if daring him to accept the script she'd rewritten. Langston tilted his head, eyes unreadable. "Have you? That's good to hear." He didn't sit, didn't move. Out of curiosity, what exactly was the issue? Rachel hesitated. Sometimes the system flags accounts for verification, security protocols, you understand. "Of course," he replied evenly. "And the gentleman who came in after me, was his account flagged too?" A beat of silence. "I can't discuss other passengers' accounts, sir." Her hands clenched beneath the counter, invisible but trembling. Langston nodded slowly. "Understandable. Then I'd like to speak with your supervisor." This time, the pause was longer than it should have been. "Mr. Reed is very busy right now," she offered weakly. "I can make a note." "I'll wait." His voice was quiet but final. Rachel swallowed. 10 feet away, another attendant froze mid-step, glancing nervously toward the back office. 20 minutes later, Thomas Reed emerged, grey suit pressed, steps deliberate, smile unconvincing. "Mr. Green," he said, extending a hand. "Thomas Reed, Operations Director. I understand there was some confusion with your lounge access." Langston didn't take the hand. "Not confusion," he said calmly. "Discrimination." A ripple moved through the terminal. Reed's smile faded half a degree. "That's a serious accusation. So is denying entry to a Diamond member while admitting a lower-tier passenger of a different race, within 30 seconds. I've documented 4 similar instances this week." Reed's mask cracked. "Sir, I assure you, assurances don't impress me. Patterns do." Langston leaned forward slightly, letting the edge in his voice cut through the air. "And what I've seen isn't random." Reed's gaze sharpened, his tone more clipped. "Our protocols are designed to identify irregularities." "Funny," Langston said, "how those irregularities seem to target the same kinds of people." Behind them, Rachel turned pale. Langston's voice dropped an octave. "Tell me, Mr. Reed, when was the last time you saw Langston Price in person?" Reed blinked. "The CEO? I never met him. Just on the live streams." Langston straightened his posture. His voice was quiet, lethal. "Then consider this your introduction." The color drained from Reed's face. The silence that followed was thunderous. A janitor paused mid-mop. A traveler's phone slipped from their hand. Rachel stumbled back a step. "I built this airline," Langston said, locking eyes with them both. "And I'm about to rebuild it again, without either of you." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The truth now hung in the air, undeniable, radioactive. And the fall had only just begun. The boardroom was ice cold, not from temperature, but from tension. 12 directors sat in tight silence, their eyes bouncing between the stack of evidence on the polished walnut table and the man who had dropped it there, Langston Price, no longer Elliot Green, no longer hidden. He stood at the head of the table, tailored suit immaculate, voice steady, but the strain behind his eyes told another story. For nearly an hour, he'd walked them through every incident, the disguised flights, the subtle humiliations, the not-so-subtle ones, the documents linking discriminatory protocols to staff hired after the Aerostar merger, the text threads, the manipulated upgrade systems, the audio recordings. The room had grown quieter with each revelation until even the air felt heavy with consequence. "We have a culture problem," he said finally, his voice no longer that of a CEO delivering a memo, but of a man digging through the wreckage of something he once loved. And it didn't start with a rogue gate agent. It was tolerated, embedded. Scaled, he exhaled slowly, pressing his hands against the back of a chair. By the time I realized it, it was already rotting from the inside. The CFO, a cautious man with risk-averse instincts, cleared his throat. "This will cost us. Bad press, lawsuits, lost revenue." Langston cut him off, his voice sharp but controlled. "What's the cost of staying silent, of doing nothing? We've already been bleeding the trust of the very passengers who built our brand." He scanned the room. "We can either spend to fix it or pay double when we're sued for it. And we will be." Moretta Lynn, a senior board member and former civil rights attorney, leaned forward. "What do you propose?" Langston laid out the plan with surgical precision. Immediate termination of the 17 implicated employees, including Reed and Sloan. A full audit of all policy changes since the merger. Mandatory retraining across all departments. Establishment of an independent passenger equity council. A public statement, led by him, acknowledging the failure and the steps to repair it. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. 10 in favor, 2 abstentions. That afternoon, Langston didn't delegate the firings, he delivered them himself. One by one, he met Reed in a quiet conference room, folder already on the table. The man barely spoke, shock clouding his arrogance. Others cried, some argued, a few begged. Langston listened, then delivered the same quiet message each time. "You had a choice. You made it." But this wasn't about revenge, not anymore. By evening, Langston's steps slowed. The adrenaline had drained, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. He stood by his office window, overlooking the runways where planes taxied and lifted off into the night sky. Lights blinking, steel cutting through clouds. This was what it had always been about. Movement, connection, dignity. Somewhere along the way, they'd lost that. Vivian entered without knocking, as always. Press statements ready, training modules are being rewritten, HR's onboarding the equity team. "But you," she paused. "You okay?" Langston didn't turn. "Number, but I will be." She studied him for a moment, then handed him a small envelope. "Passenger services forwarded this. Came in this morning. You might want to read it." He opened it. A handwritten note from Caleb Monroe. "Thank you. Not just for firing people, but for listening, for seeing." Langston's throat tightened. Redemption, he realized, didn't come wrapped in applause. It came in silence, in responsibility, in the willingness to stand in the wreckage and rebuild from it. He looked out at the lights once more. Tomorrow the apology would go public. The systems would change. The culture would begin to shift. But tonight he allowed himself one breath, one moment. The climb back had begun, and this time he wasn't doing it in the dark. The next morning, as sunlight spilled across the tarmac at Lakeview International, Langston Price stood in front of a camera in the airline's main broadcast studio. No script, no teleprompter. Just a stool, a single camera operator, and 24,000 Avion employees tuned in from terminals, break rooms, and training centers across the country. He adjusted his mic, looked into the lens, and spoke not as a CEO, but as a man who had seen the machine he built from the ground up turn against the very values it was meant to uphold. "I spent 2 weeks traveling undercover on our own airline," he began, "not as a businessman, Not as a leader, just as a passenger. I saw things I never should have seen. I was told to wait outside. I was dismissed, overlooked, treated as less than, and I wasn't alone. Too many of you have experienced the same, and too many of us looked the other way. There was no corporate polish to his voice now. It carried the quiet strength of a man who had bled for something, watched it fail, and refused to abandon it. What I found was a rot, not just in policy, but in people, in choices. And I let it happen. That ends today. The video was uploaded within minutes, and within hours it exploded. Major outlets ran it under headlines like "CEO Goes Undercover, Fires 17 After Exposing Racism on His Own Airline," and "Powerful Redemption, Airline Leader Confronts Discrimination from the Inside." Social media turned it into a movement. #WaitOutside trended worldwide, echoing the phrase that had sparked the storm. People shared their stories, not just about Avianair, but about all the places they'd been made to feel small, invisible, unworthy. Langston's speech wasn't about saving face, it was about facing truth. Back in his office that evening, Langston watched as the numbers rolled in. Customer satisfaction up 19%, refund requests dropping, and, most telling, internal feedback surging with stories of pride, of people finally feeling seen. Vivian tapped on the glass wall, holding up a message. "Caleb's flying in tomorrow. Wants to meet." Langston nodded. "Make it personal," he said. "No press. Just conversation." Because that's where the healing would live, not in headlines, but in eye contact, in listening, in accountability. That weekend, Langston walked the terminal without a disguise for the first time in weeks. A young agent, nervous, new, greeted him at the gate. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just respect. Behind her, a black mother with 2 children was escorted to pre-boarding with the same courtesy as the executive in a navy suit behind her. Langston didn't smile outwardly. He didn't need to. The change was no longer a theory. It was visible, measurable, real. And yet he knew this wasn't the end. Systems heal, but only if people stay vigilant. Because dignity, once denied, demands more than apology. It demands commitment. The lesson? Power is only redemptive when it's used to protect the powerless. Leadership means not just building something, but walking through it when it cracks, and choosing to fix it not from above, but from within. If you loved this wild ride at Lakeview International, where Langston Price's clash with silence turned injustice into a viral reckoning, then buckle up, because there's so much more to come. Hit that subscribe button for the X Daily Stories channel, your front row seat to gripping tales that twist, turn, and leave you thinking. We're dropping fresh, cinematic stories every week, drama, suspense, and lessons that stick with you long after the credits roll. Don't miss out. Join our crew, turn on notifications, and dive into the next epic adventure.